The restaurant's warm glow spilled onto the snow-covered sidewalk, a stark contrast to the darkness in James Harrington's eyes as he sat alone at his corner table. The 52-year-old CEO's fingers traced the rim of his untouched wine glass, the weight of his solitude heavier than the $10,000 watch on his wrist. If you've ever felt alone in a crowded room, you'll understand exactly what happens next in this story that reminds us what truly matters in life. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to see more stories that will touch your heart and perhaps change how you see the world around you. James checked his phone again, no messages, no calls, just the same empty notification screen he'd been staring at all day. Christmas Eve at Bellini's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and he was the only patron sitting alone. The maitre d' had raised an eyebrow when he'd requested a table for one on such a night, but James Harrington's name opened doors, even if it couldn't fill the empty chairs around him. 20 years of building Harrington Enterprises from nothing into a tech empire worth billions, and what did he have to show for it? A penthouse apartment where his footsteps echoed. A collection of cars he drove alone. And tonight, a reservation for one at a restaurant where tables were booked months in advance. "Would you care for another glass of wine, Mr. Harrington?" the waiter asked, hovering nearby with practiced deference. "No," James replied, his voice carrying the flatness of someone who had long ago forgotten how to want things. "Just the check." The waiter nodded and retreated, leaving James to stare out the frost-edged window at the falling snow. Christmas lights twinkled across the street, families hurried past with last-minute gifts, and couples walked arm in arm, their laughter visible in puffs of breath in the cold air. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Christmas meant something to him, when his wife Sarah was alive, before the cancer took her 5 years ago. Before their son Michael stopped speaking to him, blaming him for being at the office instead of the hospital during Sarah's final days. The last he'd heard, Michael was spending Christmas with his fiancée's family in Colorado. He hadn't even bothered to send an invitation. The bell above the restaurant door chimed, drawing James's attention. A woman in a worn wool coat stumbled in, snow dusting her shoulders and clinging to her dark hair. Behind her, 2 identical little girls, no more than 7 years old, clutched each other's mittened hands, their matching red scarves bright against their second-hand coats. "I'm so sorry," the woman said to the maitre d', her voice carrying across the nearly empty restaurant. "I know we don't have a reservation, but is there any chance you might have a small table? I promised the girls a special Christmas Eve dinner, and everywhere else is full." The maitre d' glanced around the restaurant, his expression apologetic but firm. "I'm afraid we're fully booked, madam. Perhaps you could try the cafe down the street?" One of the little girls looked up at her mother, her face falling. "But you said this was where Daddy used to bring you, Mommy." The woman knelt down, adjusting her daughter's scarf. "I know, sweetie. But sometimes things don't work out the way we plan. We'll find somewhere else special." James watched as the second little girl's eyes welled with tears. Something in his chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Before he could think better of it, he raised his hand. "They can join me," he called out. "I have plenty of room." The maitre d' turned, surprised. The woman looked over, her eyes widening as she recognized who had made the offer. "Oh, we couldn't possibly impose," she began, but James was already standing, gesturing to the empty chairs at his table. "Please," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "I'd welcome the company." The woman hesitated, then nodded gratefully. "Thank you. That's very kind." She guided her daughters across the restaurant, their small boots leaving melting snow prints on the polished floor. "I'm Elena," she said as they reached the table. "And these are my daughters, Lily and Rose." "James," he replied, deliberately omitting his last name, though he suspected from her expression that she already knew who he was. "Please, sit down." The girls clambered onto their chairs, eyes wide as they took in the crystal chandeliers and fine china. Elena slipped off her coat, revealing a simple but elegant dress that had seen better days. James noticed the careful darning at the sleeve, the kind of repair done by someone who couldn't afford to replace what was broken. "We don't want to interrupt your evening," Elena said, her voice soft but dignified. "We can sit quietly." James found himself smiling for the first time that night. "You're not interrupting anything worth preserving. Please, order whatever you'd like. It's Christmas Eve, after all." The waiter returned, his professional mask slipping just enough to reveal his surprise at the new arrangement. James ordered a bottle of sparkling cider for the table and encouraged Elena and the girls to choose from the menu. "Can we really have anything, Mommy?" Lily, or was it Rose, whispered loudly. "Within reason," Elena replied, her cheeks coloring slightly as she glanced at the prices. "The chef's Christmas special is excellent," James suggested. "For all of us." As they waited for their food, James learned that Elena was a widow. Her husband, a firefighter, had died 2 years ago saving a family from a burning apartment building. She was working 2 jobs, teaching kindergarten during the day and doing data entry from home at night, to keep their small apartment and give the girls as normal a life as possible. "David and I used to come here once a year, on our anniversary," she explained, looking around the restaurant with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. "I wanted the girls to see it, just once. To connect with a piece of their father." "Daddy was a hero," Rose said proudly, carefully cutting her bread roll with the concentration only a child could bring to such a task. "Yes, he was," James agreed, feeling something crack inside him, the ice that had formed around his heart over years of isolation and single-minded ambition. The food arrived, steaming plates of holiday perfection. The girls gasped in delight, their excitement infectious. James found himself laughing at their commentary on each dish, their innocent observations about the fancy people at other tables, their earnest questions about whether Santa would find them in their apartment. "Of course he will," Elena assured them. "He always knows where good children are." "Even though we moved?" Lily asked anxiously. "Even though you moved," James confirmed, catching Elena's grateful glance. As they ate, James learned more about their situation. The apartment building where they'd lived since the girls were born had been sold to a development company. The new owners had raised the rent beyond what Elena could afford, forcing them to move to a smaller place across town, away from their friends and the girls' school. "We're making it work," Elena said with quiet determination. "That's what matters." James nodded, but his mind was already turning. The development company, he knew it had to be Westfield Properties. His company had recently invested in their downtown revitalization project. He'd signed the papers without a second thought about who might be displaced. For the first time in years, James felt the weight of his decisions beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. These weren't just abstract market adjustments, they were real people with real lives. The girls finished their desserts, chocolate Yule logs with edible gold dust, their faces alight with the simple joy of the moment. Elena checked her watch and sighed. "We should go soon. It's getting late, and we have a long bus ride home." "Bus? On Christmas Eve?" James frowned. "Let me call my driver. He can take you wherever you need to go." Elena started to protest, but a glance at her tired daughters changed her mind. "That's very generous. Thank you." As they waited for the check, Lily tugged on James's sleeve. "Are you sad because you're alone on Christmas?" she asked with the direct honesty only children possess. Elena gasped. "Lily. That's not polite." But James shook his head. "It's all right. And yes, I suppose I was sad. But not anymore." "Because of us?" Rose asked hopefully. "Exactly because of you," James confirmed, surprised by how true it was. When the check came, James paid without looking at the amount. As they stood to leave, he impulsively reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "Elena, I'd like to help, if you'll let me." "Not charity," he added quickly, seeing her expression. My company has a foundation that provides educational scholarships. The girls would qualify. And we're always looking for talented teachers for our employee childcare center. Elena took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Why would you do this for strangers? James looked at the twins, who were buttoning each other's coats with clumsy fingers. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Outside, his driver waited by the sleek black car. The snow was falling harder now, transforming the city into a winter wonderland. The girls exclaimed in delight, trying to catch snowflakes on their tongues. Could we? James hesitated, then continued, would you all consider joining me tomorrow? For Christmas dinner? My house is far too big for one person, and I have a chef who's preparing enough food for an army. Elena studied his face, as if searching for hidden motives. Finding none, she smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. We'd like that very much. As they climbed into the car, Rose turned back. Mr. James? Mommy says Christmas magic is real if you believe in it. I think she's right. James stood in the falling snow, watching as the car pulled away, the girls waving frantically through the back window. For the first time in 5 years, the hollow ache in his chest had been replaced by something warm and unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it as hope. That night, in his empty penthouse, James made 2 phone calls. The first was to his son Michael, reaching his voicemail. I'm sorry, he said simply. For everything. I'd like to try again, if you'll let me. The second call was to his company's legal department, instructing them to review all investments in properties where tenants might be displaced, and to create a fund for affordable housing initiatives. As Christmas morning dawned, James woke to the unfamiliar sound of his doorbell. Opening the door, he found Elena and the twins, their arms full of homemade cookies and a small, lopsided Christmas ornament clearly crafted by children's hands. We wanted to come early to help, Elena explained. The girls insisted on bringing something. We made it for you, Lily said, holding up the ornament, a paper star covered in glitter and marked with 3 handprints. So you'll remember us. As if I could forget, James said, his voice thick with emotion as he welcomed them inside. Later that day, as they sat around his dining table, no longer empty, James's phone rang. It was Michael. Dad, his son's voice came through, hesitant but present. I got your message. I thought maybe, if the offer still stands, we could talk. James looked across the table at Elena and her daughters, who had brought light back into his world in the space of a single evening. I'd like that very much, he said. In fact, why don't you come over now? There's some people I'd like you to meet. As he hung up, Rose raised her glass of sparkling cider. To Christmas magic, she declared solemnly. To Christmas magic, they all echoed, and James knew that his life would never be the same again. 1 year later, James stood in the community center that now bore his late wife's name. Around him, families gathered for the holiday celebration, many of them former residents of buildings his company had once helped to empty, now living in affordable housing units developed through the Harrington Foundation. Elena stood beside him, her hand in his, a simple engagement ring catching the light. The twins darted through the crowd, followed by Michael and his new wife, all of them laughing as they helped distribute gifts. Did you ever imagine last Christmas Eve would change everything? Elena asked, leaning against his shoulder. James shook his head, watching as the community he'd helped rebuild celebrated together. I was the richest man in the city, and the poorest in all the ways that mattered. Until you and the girls showed me what real wealth looks like. As the snow fell outside and carols played within, James Harrington, no longer alone, no longer sad, understood that the true measure of success wasn't in what you accumulated, but in what you gave away. And in the love that had found him when he least expected it, but needed it most. Sometimes the greatest gifts come when we open our doors to strangers, and our hearts to the possibility that it's never too late to begin again. If this story touched your heart, Please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the power of human connection and the true spirit of giving, not just at Christmas, but all year round.